Welcome to Global Focus Review Channel. Long before the Great Flood, long before the law was carved into stone on Mount Sinai, there walked a man whose life seemed to bend the very rules of mortality. His name was Enoch, seventh from Adam, a man so close to the heart of God that Scripture whispers an almost impossible statement. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. What did that mean? Where did he go? And what exactly did he see in those realms beyond human comprehension? The ancient text known as the Book of the Secrets of Enoch claims to give us a clue, a breathtaking, terrifying journey through what it calls the 10 heavens. These visions are not soft clouds and harp music, no. They are raw, unsettling, cosmic realities, layers of divine order and judgment, realms where the fate of angels and men is decided. And perhaps most disturbing, Enoch claimed to witness what happens to those who rebel against God's throne. Imagine for a moment, you are Enoch. You are taken, not in dream, but in spirit and body, rising from the earth as the winds themselves obey an invisible command. The air thins, the light bends, and suddenly the world below is a dim shadow. You are rising towards something so vast, you can feel it vibrating through your bones. And then, you arrive at the first heaven. It is here that Enoch says he saw the treasuries of snow and the storehouses of dew, the orders of the clouds and the path of the winds. Everything was perfectly organized, not random, not chaotic. Even the weather obeyed God's laws, but there was also something unsettling. Angels stationed like guards, watching the movements of the natural world with eyes like burning copper. Then Enoch is carried higher, into the second heaven, and here terror begins to settle in. He says he saw angels bound in darkness, awaiting judgment. Their forms were twisted with sorrow and rage, and their voices were like deep groans from the belly of the earth. These were not demons as we imagine them. These were once glorious beings who had defied God's command, chained in a place between light and utter blackness. Enoch could hear them pleading, but the sentence had already been passed. Higher still, the third heaven. And here the contrast is almost blinding. Enoch describes an Eden-like paradise, a place where the righteous dead rest, surrounded by flowers that never wither and trees that give fruit every month. Yet, in the very same realm, he is shown the place of punishment, an abyss of fire and frost for those who reject God. Paradise and torment side by side, separated only by the unbreakable word of the Almighty. By the time Enoch reaches the fourth heaven, he is dizzy with visions of cosmic order, the sun's chariot driven by angelic hosts, the moon keeping her appointed times, the stars set in ranks as if they were soldiers in a celestial army, every beam of light, every movement in the sky, perfectly timed, God's clockwork in motion. But as the ascent continues, fifth heaven, Enoch sees a sight that chills him more than chains or flames. He finds a host of fallen angels, not yet judged, but in a state of deep mourning. They had been deceived by the rebellion of another, refusing to sing praises to the Most High, waiting for a chance that will never come. Their silence was heavy, as if the very air here refused to breathe. Sixth heaven, a place of command. Archangels and heavenly scribes recording the deeds of men and angels alike. Here, Enoch learns that nothing, no thought, no word, no hidden act is lost. It is all written, awaiting the day when books will be opened, and then the seventh heaven. The throne room's outer court. Here the angelic armies stand in ranks beyond counting, voices like waterfalls in their praise. Yet even here, Enoch is told, there are higher realms still. When Enoch is carried into the eighth heaven, he sees the zodiacal constellations, the appointed signs that mark seasons and times, not for superstition but for divine order. Ninth heaven, the upper storehouses of light, the very fabric from which creation was woven. And then, the 10th heaven, where he stands before the Lord himself. No image can capture it, no word can describe it. Enoch falls on his face, the very sound of God's voice shattering every human strength. And here's where it gets even more chilling, because from the 10th heaven, Enoch is shown not only the glories of God's creation, but the inevitable downfall of rebellion. He is given visions of those who rise up against God as appointed servants, and in those visions lies the shadow of a later event that would shake the camp of Israel, the rebellion of Korah. Centuries after Enoch, Israel wandered the wilderness. The tabernacle stood in the center of camp, the Ark of the Covenant resting within, and Moses, chosen by God, led the people. But among them was Korah, a Levite who was not content with his role. The whispers began. Moses takes too much on himself. Aren't all of God's people holy? Why should he lead and not us? Those whispers turned into a movement. Korah, along with Dathan, Abiram, and 250 well-known leaders, stood before Moses and Aaron, defiance in their eyes. The challenge was not merely against human authority, it was against the very order of God himself. Moses fell on his face. He knew what Enoch had seen. He knew what happens when beings, whether angelic or human, rise against the throne's decree. He proposed a test. Each man take a censer, fill it with incense, and present it before the Lord. Let God decide. The next morning, the air in the camp was thick with tension. Hundreds gathered to watch. The rebels stood proud, censers in hand, and then the ground trembled. A crack split the earth beneath Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. The very soil opened its mouth. In an instant, they and their households, their possessions, even the ground beneath their feet were swallowed alive. The earth closed over them, and they vanished into the depths. At that moment, fire shot out from the presence of the Lord and consumed the 250 leaders holding censers. Their polished brass was gathered afterward, not as trophies, but as a warning. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the echo between Enoch's vision and this moment in the wilderness. The chained angels of the second heaven, the mournful silence of the fifth, the records kept in the sixth, all of it pointing to one truth. Rebellion against the Most High is not an act without consequence. And yet, there's something else Enoch was shown. The heavens are not only places of judgment, but of mercy, mercy offered to those willing to bow, to turn, to align themselves with the order God set from the beginning. And as the story of Israel unfolds, this tension between judgment and mercy keeps repeating. From the fall of angels to the swallowing of Korah, from the silence of the fifth heaven to the roar of praise in the seventh, the pattern is clear. Enoch's journey was not just a tour of cosmic architecture, it was a revelation of the stakes we live with every day. And what comes next in this chain of visions will take us beyond Enoch's time, beyond Korah's rebellion, into realms where prophecy and history collide, where the unseen becomes visible, and where the fate of nations is decided in the courts above. But Enoch's journey didn't end with the mere sight of the heavens. The angels who escorted him, tall beyond human height, robed in garments woven with light, began to speak of things rarely entrusted to mortal ears. They told him of the laws of the stars, how each constellation had been assigned an angelic guardian, and how even the movements of planets were part of a great orchestration, pointing to the unfolding of God's plan on earth. They warned him that when certain signs aligned, great rebellions would rise among men, rebellions echoing the cosmic revolt that began before Adam's breath was drawn. They showed him scrolls in the sixth heaven, scrolls so vast they seemed to stretch like rivers of parchment, written in a language that looked alive. Every action of mankind was there, not just deeds but motives, secret thoughts, and moments of decision. And Enoch noticed something haunting. Beside certain names, there were marks, dark, heavy seals. His guide explained, "These are the ones who chose the path of Korah before Korah's time. The spirit of rebellion walks through the generations, binding itself to the proud." Then Enoch was shown a vision of a wilderness, but it was not the wilderness of Sinai. This was a barren place between the realms, where shadows took human form. They were souls who had neither bowed in repentance nor hardened into final judgment, a restless place of waiting. These shades whispered to one another, recalling their deeds, convincing themselves that they had been justified. Among them were leaders who once carried the law on their lips, but poisoned hearts within. One voice among them rose loud, a figure who had challenged a prophet, and Enoch realized it was not only Korah who had done so in Israel's history. His angelic guide explained that the rebellion of Korah was part of a greater pattern, how in every age God appoints servants, and in every age the adversary stirs the proud to overthrow them. Enoch saw flashes of other rebellions, Absalom standing at the gates of Jerusalem, stealing the hearts of the people from David, Sheba, son of Bichri, calling Israel to abandon the king, Jeroboam crafting golden calves to keep the people from returning to the temple. And each time the end was the same, judgment sudden and final, as if the earth itself could not bear their presence. As they ascended once more, the angel took Enoch into a chamber unlike any other he had seen. It was not filled with light or shadow, but with something weightier: silence. In that silence, Enoch saw images suspended like smoke, moments where men stood at the threshold between obedience and rebellion. The guide whispered, "Every act of rebellion begins here, in the pause before the choice." He saw Korah again, the night before his uprising. The man paced his tent, his mind turning over words, imagining the faces of those who would follow him. He convinced himself that Moses' leadership was arrogance, not appointment. In that pause, the seeds were sown. Then the visions shifted. Enoch saw the wilderness camp not from the ground, but from the air, as the heavenly host saw it. The pillars of cloud and fire stood like divine sentinels in the center, but from above rebellion looked like a spreading stain, voices whispering, hearts leaning away, the invisible threads of loyalty snapping one by one. And Enoch understood this was why God judged so swiftly. Rebellion left unchecked spreads through a people like rot through wood. The angel spoke again. "The 10 heavens are not just realms above you, Enoch. They are the order of creation itself. When rebellion begins below, it echoes above. It pulls against the cords that hold the cosmos in place." This is why the earth swallowed Korah. It was not merely a punishment. It was a sealing, a restoration of balance. Enoch was then shown the Hall of Times, a vast expanse where ages were laid out like woven tapestries. He saw the days of Noah, when the watchers descended, bringing forbidden knowledge and sparking corruption so great that floodwaters became mercy. He saw the days of Babel, when the tower climbed toward the heavens and men thought they could breach the courts of God by sheer will. And he saw Korah's day, woven in the same thread as these ancient uprisings. But then his guide pointed toward the yet unwoven edge of the tapestry. There were loose threads glowing faintly, waiting to be placed. Enoch asked, "What is this?" The angel's face grew solemn. "These are the rebellions yet to come, the Korahs of the last days. They will not stand in tents or deserts. They will rise in cities, in courts, in assemblies of nations. They will wear the mask of righteousness, but reject the order of the king." The vision darkened. Enoch saw vast gatherings of people shouting against the heavens, overturning the words of the prophets, exalting leaders who promised freedom, yet chained them in unseen bonds. And above them shadows moved, fallen powers whispering into the hearts of kings and commoners alike. The rebellion was no longer a campfire in the wilderness. It was a wildfire consuming nations. Then Enoch's perspective shifted to a place no mortal had stood, the threshold of the deep, where the foundations of the earth rest. There, chains thicker than mountains bound spirits who had once walked the upper heavens. These were the architects of rebellion, the ones whose whispers had stirred Korah, Absalom, Jeroboam, and countless others. They strained against their bonds, eyes like burning voids, but the chains held fast until the day appointed. The guide told Enoch, "The rebellion you saw in Korah's camp is a shadow of the greater revolt yet to come, and the judgment that fell on him is a shadow of the judgment that will one day fall upon the last rebels, when the heavens and the earth will shake together." But before Enoch could ask when that day would come, his vision shifted once more. He now stood on a high wall overlooking the earthly Jerusalem, not the one of his day, but one far in the future. He saw the temple courts filled with merchants, priests debating in corners, and in the midst of it, a man with eyes of flame turning over tables. The angel whispered, "He came to restore the order of the heavens to the earth." Enoch suddenly understood that every rebellion in history was, at its root, a challenge to that order, an attempt to dethrone the one whose presence filled the 10th heaven. From the watchers of old to Korah's uprising, from Absalom's treachery to the merchants in the temple, the thread was the same. The vision began to expand again, drawing Enoch's eyes to a scene yet stranger still, where the heavens seemed to crack open, and the armies of the Lord descended like living fire. The rebellious hosts below gathered in defiance, their leaders speaking great boasts, their banners raised high. And in that moment, Enoch saw the final echo of Korah's fate. The earth split, the skies roared, and the order that began in the first heaven swept down through all the realms to end the revolt forever. But before that end, there were still ages to pass, choices to be made, men and women standing in the pause before the decision. And Enoch was sent back, carrying a message few would believe, that the heavens themselves are watching, and the fate of Korah is never far from the fate of the proud. And so the story continued. Enoch was carried to a place beyond the borders of the heavens he had already traversed, into what the angel called the chambers of measure. Here he saw vast instruments, celestial devices of impossible scale, crafted not of metal or stone, but of pure light and sound. These were the balances by which God weighed nations, the plumb lines that measured the integrity of kings, the scales that determined whether generations would be lifted in blessing or cast into correction. Every nation had a weight, every ruler a measure, every age a span assigned to it. Enoch watched as the angel placed a stone upon one of the scales, and with its weight came the memory of a people. He saw their rise, their triumphs, their drift into corruption, and the moment the balance tipped against them. The angel's voice was low and unshaken. When the measure is full, judgment does not delay. From there, Enoch was led to a corridor lined with immense doors, each carved with scenes from history, some familiar, others yet to unfold. The first door opened to the camp of Israel during the days of Moses, but the scene was not Korah's rebellion this time. Instead, Enoch saw the people demanding meat in the wilderness, rejecting the manna from heaven as worthless. In their craving, they forgot the miracles, despised the provision, and demanded their own will. The angel explained, "Rebellion wears many faces. It is not always a shout of defiance. Sometimes it is a slow turning away, a quiet despising of what God gives." Another door revealed the days of King Saul, a man chosen by God, but undone by his own pride. Enoch watched Saul's hands trembling as he offered the sacrifice that Samuel was appointed to give, unable to wait for God's timing. The angel spoke again. Rebellion is not always against the prophet. It is sometimes the prophet himself who rebels against the order set over him. The next chamber drew Enoch into a time after his own, to the court of King Jehoiakim. Here he saw the prophet Jeremiah standing with a scroll, a message from God himself. Jehoiakim's face was twisted with disdain as he took a knife, cut the scroll piece by piece, and fed it into the fire. The angel's tone grew heavier. This is rebellion against the voice. When the word is destroyed, the people soon follow. Enoch was then shown something stranger still, a table in the middle of a dim hall, and upon it, crowns of many shapes and sizes. Some were brilliant, glowing as if alive. Others were tarnished and cracked. The angel revealed that these crowns belonged to leaders who had been entrusted with authority from heaven. Some guarded their crowns with humility, bending to the will of the king. Others twisted them into tools for their own glory. And Enoch realized Korah's uprising was not only about position, it was about the crown that did not belong to him, a crown he reached for without being called. Suddenly, the chamber shifted into a vast field under a blood-colored sky. There, countless figures stood in lines stretching to the horizon, each clutching something in their hands. Some held scrolls, others swords, others scales. The angel explained that these were the records of the rebellions of the earth, assembled for the day when heaven's armies would march. The records were not for God's memory, for he forgets nothing, but for the witnesses of all creation, that no one could say the judgment was without cause. Enoch's eyes were drawn upward, where the firmament itself seemed to ripple like water. Through it, he could see the watchers, beings stationed at the edges of the worlds, tasked with observing the movements of men. They did not interfere, but their gaze was unrelenting. Some looked upon the righteous with joy, others beheld the rebels with eyes of mourning. The angel told him, "They will testify on the day the books are opened." From there, Enoch was brought to a realm where time itself seemed fractured, moments from different centuries suspended in the air like shards of glass. He saw Korah's rebellion side by side with Jeroboam's golden calves, the mocking crowds before Noah's ark, next to the jeering voices before the cross. It was as though all acts of rebellion were linked by invisible chains, echoing the same ancient defiance that began with the first angel to say, "I will ascend." But in the midst of this tapestry of revolt, Enoch saw flashes of something unexpected, acts of repentance, moments where the tide could have turned. He saw Nineveh, from king to beggar, clothed in sackcloth, halting the judgment that had been written against them. He saw David, after his sin, falling on his face, breaking the chain before it could tighten, and the angel reminded him, "Not every rebellion ends in destruction. Some are stopped by humility, but humility must come before the measure is full." They moved on to the Hall of Thrones, where seats of authority from every age stood. Some were empty, waiting for those yet to be called. Others were overturned, the dust of judgment upon them. Enoch saw the throne of Moses, unchallenged in heaven though contested on earth, and understood that Korah's defiance had never touched its true foundation. The angel finally brought Enoch to a balcony overlooking a sea that was not of water but of living fire. The flames moved like waves, and within them Enoch saw the reflections of faces. Kings, prophets, priests, rebels, saints, all swept along by the currents. Some rode the waves upward toward light, others sank beneath the surface, vanishing into the deep. The angel said, "This is the sea of history. Every rebellion, every obedience, every choice flows into it." Enoch leaned forward, searching the depths, and there, far below, he saw the faint image of an event not yet come. It was a rebellion so vast that the nations themselves seemed to merge into one voice of defiance. Yet over that roar came the sound of trumpets, not earthly but from the upper heavens, and with it the shadow of the one who would bring the sea to stillness. And just as the image sharpened, the vision shifted again. Enoch was taken now to a place the angel called the Wells of Testimony. It was not a single well, but many, stretching in every direction, each one a deep, glowing reservoir. The water was not liquid, but something brighter, a living record of spoken words. The angel gestured for Enoch to look into one, and immediately he heard the murmurs of the Israelites in the wilderness, complaints rising like smoke, filling the well with a bitter hue. Another well nearby contained the words of the prophets, and its water shone like gold. The angel explained, "Every word uttered under heaven is recorded. Even rebellion begins with words before it becomes action. Korah's uprising began here, in the wells, long before the earth swallowed him." Enoch was then shown a vast plain, at the center of which stood a single tree, whose roots burrowed deep into the earth and whose branches stretched into the stars. On each branch sat beings of light, while at the roots shadows gnawed, trying to weaken the trunk. The angel told him this was the tree of obedience, planted before the foundations of the world. Every act of surrender to God nourished it. Every act of defiance drained its strength. He saw moments in history where whole branches withered, times of mass rebellion, yet the core endured, for its seed had been planted by the king himself. The vision shifted again, and now Enoch stood at the edge of a massive valley, its floor filled with what looked like abandoned thrones. Some were ancient and carved from stone, others gilded with gold, others nothing more than plain wooden seats. The angel said, "These are the thrones of those who could have ruled under heaven's authority, but they abandoned their call for the sake of rebellion. See how many are empty, because the bearers refused to submit." Enoch recognized some from his earlier visions: leaders who had defied prophets, kings who had embraced idols, judges who had perverted justice. Their thrones lay untouched, never to be filled again. Beyond the valley, Enoch saw a structure like a fortress made entirely of sound. Every wall was a chorus of voices praising the Most High. But on one side there was a gap, an opening where the music faltered. The angel revealed this was where the songs of the fifth heaven had been broken by the silence of those angels who refused to sing. "Rebellion is not only in what you do," the angel said, "it is also in what you withhold." Enoch was then led to the gates of the seasons, colossal arches set in a circle, each one guarded by an angel with garments that matched the colors of the time they kept. One wore green and gold for the harvest, another deep blue and white for the winter, another crimson for the season of blood and war. The angel guiding Enoch explained that every season on earth was tied to a heavenly gate, and that rebellion could cause these gates to open or close before their appointed time. He was shown how the rebellion in the wilderness had caused a delay, stretching 40 days into 40 years, the gates of promise remaining shut until the generation of defiance had passed. Further still, they entered a narrow hallway of mirrors. Each mirror did not show Enoch's reflection, but a face from history. Men and women at the very instant before they chose rebellion or obedience. Some leaned toward light, some toward shadow. In one mirror, he saw a young man clutching silver coins, eyes darting as if weighing betrayal. In another, a priest stood at the threshold of the temple, deciding whether to speak truth or remain silent. The angel's voice was quiet here. The moment before the choice is the moment all heaven watches most closely. Enoch stepped out from the hall and into a room filled with banners, some pure and unstained, others tattered and darkened. These were the standards of allegiance, each representing a people or a kingdom. When a nation walked in alignment with heaven, their banner glowed. When they turned in rebellion, its light dimmed. The angel touched one of the banners, and Enoch saw the day Korah stood before Moses. The banner of Israel flickered, not extinguished but shadowed. The angel then carried Enoch higher still, into a place where the air itself shimmered with judgment yet to be delivered. Here he saw sealed vessels, each one trembling as if something within pressed to be released. The angel explained that these were judgments held in reserve, waiting for the appointed time. Some were for cities, some for entire empires, some for individuals whose rebellion had not yet reached its full measure. Enoch understood that Korah's judgment had been swift, not because God was impatient, but because the measure had already overflowed. At the far edge of this realm, Enoch saw what looked like an enormous ledger, open to a page that glowed brighter than the rest. It was the record of those who had opposed God's appointed servants across history. The names were not grouped by nation or era. They were linked like a chain, stretching from the earliest days to the final generation. Korah's name was there, linked to others before and after him, each link a warning that the spirit of rebellion travels through time, finding new hosts. From the ledger, Enoch's guide took him to a balcony that overlooked what seemed like an unending battlefield. But there were no swords or shields here, only banners, words, and choices. On one side stood those who had surrendered to the will of the king. On the other, those who had claimed sovereignty for themselves. Between them was a vast chasm, and at its center the memory of Korah's pit, a reminder of where self-exaltation leads. And just as the sight began to fade, Enoch sensed that this vision was only the threshold to something greater. There are moments in life when the path ahead feels like a long, winding road disappearing into the mist. You can't see the end, you don't know how far it goes, and each step feels heavier than the last. In those moments, it's easy to believe you've been abandoned, forgotten, or left to fight your battles alone. But here's the truth. The very silence you fear might be the space where your deepest strength is being built. Think of the seed buried in the darkness of the soil. From the outside, it looks dead, motionless, and forgotten. But deep inside, something is stirring. Roots are digging downward, unseen, creating the foundation that will one day hold the weight of a tall tree. Without that hidden work, without that time underground, there could never be growth. And just like that seed, your hidden battles, your unseen tears, your private moments of wrestling with yourself, they are not wasted. They are forming the roots that will hold you when the winds of life rage against you. Life doesn't always reward us instantly. Sometimes it withholds the answer, delays the breakthrough, not to punish us, but to prepare us. Because rushing a process can destroy what patience could have perfected. The goldsmith knows this. Gold must pass through fire long enough for every impurity to be burned away, but not so long that it melts into nothing. Timing is everything. And right now, even if you feel pressed and heated by life's challenges, remember, the fire is not to destroy you, but to refine you. And yet, in our modern world, we've been trained to run from discomfort, to escape struggle, to look for shortcuts that promise instant relief. But here is the problem. Shortcuts often rob us of the very lessons that make us strong enough to carry the blessings we're asking for. A mountain climber who's lifted to the top by a helicopter may see the view, but they'll never have the legs, lungs, and resilience of the one who climbed it step by step. Your struggle is not proof of weakness. It is the proof you're building strength for something greater. There will be days when it feels like no one sees your effort, like all your pushing, striving, and enduring has gone unnoticed. But you are seen. The quiet battles you fought when the world was asleep, the choices you made to keep going when quitting would have been easier, they matter. They shape the person you are becoming. You don't need an audience to validate your growth. Sometimes the most powerful transformations happen in the unseen, in the moments when you choose to do what is right, even when no one is watching. We live in a culture that celebrates the harvest, but ignores the planting season. People will clap when they see the fruit, but few will stand beside you when you're digging in hard, rocky soil. That's why you must be your own encourager, your own voice in the darkness telling yourself, this pain will not last forever. This effort will not be wasted, because the moment will come, quietly at first, when the first green shoots of your labor break through the surface and you will realize all that time underground was not a prison, but a preparation. Even the fiercest storms have an end. The waves crash, the wind howls, the sky turns black, and yet somewhere above the clouds the sun still shines. You may not see it now, but it's there. Your current season of hardship is not the end of your story. It is a chapter, a moment, a test that will one day become part of your testimony. And here is the thing, your victory won to always look like the one you imagined. Sometimes the win is not in getting exactly what you wanted, but in becoming the kind of person who can stand unshaken no matter what happens. That kind of victory can't be taken away from you. So keep moving, even if your steps are small. Keep fighting, even if your hands are tired. Keep believing, even if your faith feels fragile. Because somewhere beyond this chapter, beyond this night, beyond this mountain, there is a version of you who will look back and say, I didn't think I could make it, but I did. Throughout this journey, we have walked through valleys of doubt, climbed mountains of perseverance, and crossed rivers of challenge. We have seen how courage is forged not in comfort, but in the fire of trials. We have learned that setbacks are not signs of defeat, but invitations to rise stronger. We spoke of the importance of holding onto vision when the path grows dark, of nurturing discipline when motivation fades, and of finding strength in faith, in hope, and in the quiet belief that tomorrow holds something worth fighting for. We explored the mindset of resilience, how small, consistent steps create monumental change, and how failure is not a wall, but a doorway to growth. We saw that true strength is not about never falling, but about rising every single time we do. We learned to listen to the whispers of persistence when the world shouts to quit, and to trust the process even when the results are not yet visible. Through stories of determination, lessons from history, and reflections from everyday life, one truth became clear. The human spirit is far more powerful than any obstacle, and the moment you choose to keep moving forward, despite the weight, despite the pain, you have already won the most important battle. So remember, the road may be long, the nights may be cold, and the burden may feel heavy, but within you is the same force that has carried countless others to their victory. Your story is still being written, and every step you take adds another chapter to the legacy you are building. Keep walking, keep believing, keep becoming. Because in the end, it was never just about reaching the destination. It was about who you became along the way.